Welcome, everybody. This is Marco Marinucci from Mind the Bridge, and today, as part of our Mind the Chat series, we have the great pleasure to host Francesco Starace, CEO of the Enel Group. Hi, Francesco.
Hi, how are you, Marco?
Very good. Good to see you again, in good shape. How have you been?
I've been locked down for a while.
Yeah, so how have you lived?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Your last 3 months? I have to say that, this week is an important time for Italy,
Yes.
as you're in Rome, as Italy for the first time is going into phase, I don't know if it's 2.0, 2.5, but it's outside of the lockdown. Phase two.
Yeah.
How have you lived these last 3 months?
Actually, they've been 2.5. Yes, quite funny actually. We locked down everyone around the world. 37,000 people went into this cyberspace all together, hand in hand, and we were, wondering what was going to happen. Lots of things happened that were pretty interesting, and all in all, I should say life has been very different in many ways. The lockdown in Italy and Spain has been extremely serious. So basically, we have been working, and then not really getting out of our homes a lot. I mean, I actually went out once a week just because, I live in the center of Rome. Rome is a beautiful city. And you can imagine Rome without tourists is amazingly beautiful. It's like mind-bogglingly beautiful, but it's so strange and so monumentally cold that I just had once a week the courage to go out and walk around, and that was more than enough. So basically, I've been at home. I bought one of these cycling rollers that you can.
I was about to ask you. I know that you
cycle around and go into some strange places with everybody else. I discovered a world of virtual cycling that is amazing. But apart from that, I worked and I kept in touch with a lot of people. It was quite an experience, I should say.
I want first to kind of frame the discussion and maybe give a little bit of a color. Let's talk about Enel first. We have a very international audience, so we have some data, of your latest number, just to get a sense of the size of the operation that you guys manage. You as the group CEO, that is, you are the largest private player in renewables with a capacity of nearly 46 gigawatts. And we're going to talk about the mix of the importance of renewables and how today they're becoming the central part. I think next year is the year that you're expecting renewables to be the majority of your capacity. You're the first global private network operator. You have 70 million customers around the world, 68,000 employees. You're present in 32 countries, 5 continents. You're a very big structure, and to some extent, I think is a success story that has to be told also in the trends and the new leadership that you're taking, in particular when it comes to the renewable piece. That's part of the discussion we're going to have today. Before going there, I just want to get a little bit of history, also of the experience that of our previous conversation. I had the pleasure to meet you probably at least a good 10 years ago, I would say. I think the first time I met you
already.
you keynote one of the events that we hosted here at Stanford University, probably.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago, actually.
10 years ago, at least. And then we had a couple of other interviews. In fact, in preparation of this conversation, I went to see them also to get a sense of really what was important, top of our minds at the time. And I found one in 2012. You were the CEO of Enel Green Power at the time. Yeah. So your focus was clearly, talking about the importance of renewables at the time was clearly not as hot. I was still at Google and I was started pushing, Mind the Bridge as really the foundation to promote entrepreneurship. That was 2012. Then a few years later, a second interview again in Milan at Corriere della Sera, we were talking about the corporate. I was focusing as Mind the Bridge at the integration of corporate startups, and you were talking about really the intrapreneurship importance of having an entrepreneurial organization, so the need of help of contaminating the company of Enel with startups. Again, at that time you were the CEO of Enel as you are today. 2020, what is top of your mind? I'm telling you, I'll start sharing. I think in this process probably is getting more mature or old, as the kids would say, but I think sustainability, the ability to build a more sustainable world has become top of my mind. What is your priority these days? I think
clearly this is, let's say, as an underlying substance. I mean, if you look at, even during this COVID crisis, you can see it even more spectacularly. I mean, there was a time when sustainability was considered a cost. So companies said, okay, we need to be sustainable, so how much does it cost? And that was, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it was just the beginning of the cycle. Now the issue is, can you survive being unsustainable in the next, say, 10 years? Probably less, but say 10 years. Can you actually really conceivably convince anyone to put his money into your company if you don't project this kind of message that your company leaves behind itself not a streak of rubbish and some destroyed environment, but more or less what it left, what it found when it started. It's basically, can you actually think that you will be able to survive in this environment and in this climate and with this kind of investor appetites in the future 10 years, not addressing sustainability from the grassroots, from the beginning? The answer is clearly not. I mean, it is, and you would see this happening. I mean, this is just as we saw 10 years ago renewables happening, and many people didn't look at that. This is really what this is all about. It's basically survival or not. Do you want to be around or just go away? Which is like, look, many companies just simply go away. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? It's just a Darwinian evolutionary thing. But we would like to stick around for a while, okay? And we think that we have a serious chance of doing it if we address sustainability throughout the operations, not just as somebody taking care of it, not just as something to be paid and therefore obtained, but as a way of doing things. And as always, this kind of approach is a little bit complex at the beginning and requires more time. So you cannot just be sustainable in a minute because it doesn't happen. So you need to understand, train everyone, let everyone really understand it again and again and again and again. And then once a number, let's say, now that we're in the COVID, once you get herd immunity from this standpoint, so you have enough people that understand this concept properly, the other guys just get around with it. So the company needs to really needs to understand it fully in its body, not in its mind. So people need to really make it their own thing.
And so,
and this is taking some time, less than what you would expect, but some effort from the management standpoint, some dedication, a lot of truth. You have to tell the truth. You cannot skip this just lying around. You have to see the truth what it is.
And I think now we do have an opportunity, actually, a big opportunity to do it even more clearly. I have to say that I'm a great fan of yours, but I've been always and in the past, but I have to
Thank
say
you.
that I've been very sincere for that. In this time of a crisis, following you and kind of where you stand and your leadership, your proactive attitude, and your kind of a approach that is I feel to be balanced and genuine. That it's not just corporate jargon. I think it is coming from way before, but you also, I think, exposing a very positive, opportunity and proactive. Sense of how things can be better. So that's where I would like to focus our chat, and maybe to some extent going even over our sense of the world and some philosophical sense of it.
It's not just a threat. It can be a threat. It can be also a threat, but it helps our lives. It helps our health. It helps our development. It speeds our thinking. It enables us to do things that we would even dream of time ago.
On the other side, again, totally agree with you. This is a tragic crisis, but it's also on one side not only a crash course in digitization, really learning macroeconomic, but it's also a great opportunity to reset our system. So it feels like it's not even a control alt delete, but it's really pulling the plug out and really having a deep reset. So that's the first question I would have for you is. How do we plan a reality that could be better, after the crisis? And there is a couple of weeks ago, I think I was reading probably El País, and there was a reporter that said that, of this writing on the wall, big letters in Madrid that said, "Non volveremos a la normalidad porque la normalidad era el problema." The normality was the issue. So what does that entail? How can a sustainable future be built after this?
Well, I think we knew already. There's nothing. I mean, this COVID-19 is only a big accelerator. I mean, we knew already that there was an intrinsic and sustainable pattern in many of the things we did, and there was a better way of doing them. We also knew this was for the environment, but it would also be a relationship between human being, inequality, lots of stuff. I mean, you name it. So now what we have is an incredible opportunity to just get faster into that improvement that we understood already, where some of us were trying to go. We have a big opportunity to do it faster, just because we did these 2 months of reflection at home, or the tragedy around us and the suffering that the economic crisis is throwing around us make it so clear.
Right.
Should we now put all these trillions of dollars at work to rebuild exactly the system that we knew we had to change already? Or should we just say, okay, wait a minute, I put the money into that or into something different that maybe is what exactly I wanted to do, and let's just do that. So then let's say that we are 60, 70, 80% all right, and 20% is a mistake. It's already a big jump. I mean, we're not going to be precisely perfect in doing it, but certainly we're going to be there faster than just gradually improving what we had before. And, normal settles in fast. So it's something that we can do right away.
Right. I mean, even before going there, I mean, that might be a little bit of a wider discussion, but I have to admit that, especially the first few weeks, really the sense of the current institutions as we thought, the role of governments, the role of a local institution, of the county here, that's where we're looking at, versus the United States is even more complex, but I think that's true throughout the world. Really the role that we gave them, is being questioned, and what are the references that today we should look at, including the ways that in the last 50, 60, 80, 100 years, we consider the economy as a measure of well-being, right? Does it make sense still to look at the GDP as the only real metric of progress? Same if you're going to go micro, the shareholder value. So again, this is more of a philosophical question, but I think it's important because it's an opportunity of the reset.
But I agree with you. You have to have some metrics, otherwise you don't do anything. Okay. So is the GDP the right metrics? Maybe alone, not anymore. I'm not one of those suggesting let's do another GDP calculation. Okay, fine, let's have the GDP. But maybe we can couple to the GDP another couple of indicators, at least one of them addressing the degree of inequality at the same level of GDP. Because honestly, the quality of a GDP that has 5% of the population in an extremely fantastic well-being position and 30% below poverty is a GDP, and a GDP that doesn't have these extremes is maybe something you have to prefer. So I'm suggesting that let's have the GDP so that everyone is relaxing, that we're not changing the world too fast, but let's add this inequality measurement as a complement so that also governments can say, okay, I'm driving with the GDP dial, but I see another thing here, which maybe I can also use to see whether things are going fine.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I think, a great opportunity to take a reset like this into something that is drastic, because we didn't even question GDP, or you would feel an extremist, if you were to question the current status quo of this race to growth and to GDP. I have to say that again, I've been living in this country in the US for 20 years, so I feel totally I'm dual citizen. And so very opportunistically, I always take part of, the countries of my dual citizenship that are doing best. So to be associated with them. But I have to say, when, in a regular timing, clearly I was running out of good cards to play to say I'm from Europe. And I have to say that this time, for quite some time, looking at the role of Europe that can play, I was reading the document that was launched when the Green Deal was presented by Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, at the end of the year in December 2019. And that was, to me, even emphatically speaking, that was presented as today is the start of a new journey. So today is Europe, man on the moon moment. So, but I have to say, for one time, reading that document is 20 pages, and I really, suggest people to read it if you haven't done it. You cannot not agree with that, and it's very inspirational, refreshing, because it doesn't talk about just economy, but it talks a lot about justice. It talks a lot about fair and prosperous. Here, I've just put a few comments of the recap of that. The Green Deal, the focus of the Green Deal is clearly neutrality, net neutrality by 2050, and how to get there, right? So how to reduce emission and readdress the objective of emissions. So reducing by 50% the emissions that we used to produce in Europe in 1990 in 10 years from now, so 2030. And overall, as we see here in the data, how to transform the Europe economy into a fair and prosperous society, which is, words that I haven't read, for example, here for quite some time, how to be resource efficient and a competitive economy. And to do that, clearly, there is a cost, and we're talking now, in the era of the COVID, where we're being trained now to take the trillions as something that is doable. US economy, I've seen it before, but if you see this number, so 260 billion per year of annual investment, that is 1.5 of the European GDP of last year, 2 years ago. And overall, we're talking about at least $1 trillion of the European Green Deal investment plan. So big numbers and a very big commitment in something that can actually be transformational for the planet. What do you think about this? How did you live it?
Look, first of all, I think that I met Ursula von der Leyen and also Franz Timmermans, who is the vice president that takes a lot in this. they believe sincerely in this approach. I mean, it's not lip service. They really are into it. And the word fair that was put in there should be coupled with the other package that they didn't show here, which is the one that they called the Just Transition package,
Yes.
which has to address the losing part of the transition. That means, let's say the green transition is clearly a good idea for Europe on the net. So you create more jobs than you destroy, you create more value than you destroy. So the net is a great idea. But there are parts of the economy of Europe that are going to be transformed into something else or just disappear. So what about these guys? Can you expect them to be happy? No. Can you just tell them, don't worry, it's going to be fine and forget about it? No. They will fight against it. They will do whatever. This is normal, it's human, it's totally understandable and to be expected. So they have structured a package that takes care of that. They said, this must be a transition, but it has to be just. So no one will have to lose in it. And therefore, what needs to be done in terms of retraining, what needs to be done in terms of compensating, what needs to be done in terms of welfare in general, or technology shifts, what money is needed to do that, so that the minds of people are not opposed to this transition. Each one finds its own role. I think that package today is the tool that Europe is going to use to kickstart the economy. And I spoke with Franz Timmermans 3 days ago, actually, it was Friday. They clearly say, we are not going to waste this opportunity to accelerate the transition, putting more money into it than we had before, and fighting back against a possible backlash, saying, there's a crisis, there's COVID-19, we cannot afford to do this. It's not a question that you cannot afford. It's even more convenient. So double down, do it even more. And in that sense, I think Europe has a serious chance of getting ahead in the new post-COVID transformation.
I also have to say, I'm playing the best cards of what Europe has been in the past, right? Really, I think if it's, setting the standards for a global plan of sustainability that is crucial and is at the core of everybody's life and economy, and expect some changes. The plan actually explains pretty well the different areas of impact that is clearly on the energy is key, but it talks about food, or an economy
water.
That is much more water, and an economy that is much more based on recycling, right? So a number of subjects that are really central to everybody's life. I think if there is a continent today that can take the leadership, I think that could be the chance. I would be much more worried if try to reach the technological development or the growth at all cost of China. But in this very particular case, I think that's where Europe could play their best cards. So I'm actually pretty positive about this. It's interesting, the topic that you mentioned, because I was about to ask you if you think that this crisis, all this planning was started at the end of the year. To some extent also, I don't think was much expected. I spoke to some of the people at the Commission. I felt like this very plan of the Green Deal was not really baked from time before, and was eventually, I think today is impacting all the different plans of the European Commissions. But do you think specifically that, for example, the oil price as they are today at historical bottom are prevent this to happen? So clearly there are less incentives to divest from fossil fuel. There is a study from Romania that we're just reading last week that actually brought some good numbers of how that can be, a potential, one of the multiple issues that the European Commission have to cross. Do you think that oil prices at a historical bottom could be an issue in this process?
No, actually, I think the contrary. I think that the volatility of oil prices, which is not something we discovered today, it's been around for decades. And the fact that Europe basically has exhausted for what it, almost totally the oil reserves that were present in the continent should be clear. Europe cannot be exposed to these fluctuations and to this, risk forever. So this is not something you can fix overnight. I mean, it takes decades probably to get out of this habit. It's going to be a long story. It's not going to be happening overnight. But I must tell you, it happened already with coal just after the war, or slightly before, but across the war, across the Second World War. It's not that coal did go away all of a sudden. Coal is still around, in quite sizable manner. But basically, this process started like that. And because things happen faster now than they happened before, this transient that today we see in decades will probably happen faster time. But today we're not capable of doing that. One of the experiences in this life is that you project something, then you take 30% off your projection and you're maybe right. Try that retroactively. Take any projection, look at when it actually happened, and you find that it's basically always 30% faster.
And what you initially expected.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I did myself this exercise, and since I started doing it, I'm much more right than I used to be before. So
that's a good trick. A totally different topic, but I think as interesting, and I've seen a lot of interest, including from the policymakers in supporting a financial tools that can be aligned with the Green Deal. So I want to talk about the green bonds because you guys have been one of the first innovators and talk about innovation and sustainability together. You launched the first Green Deal, green bond, probably a couple of years ago already, extremely successful. And then you moved to a different version of it, probably an upgrade to it, more of a what you call the SDG, the UN Sustainable Development Goals linked bond. So what's been the process? What have you learned? Maybe we should describe what a green bond is.
It's a very interesting thing. Yeah, the green bond is a product that is already quite known to the markets, maybe more in Europe than in the US, but also in the US. So the green bond is basically a bond that you issue committing to use the funds from the bond to build certain infrastructure, certain projects or infrastructure that are labeled green. So they have renewable energy content or enable renewable energy content to be deployed on the market. So it is a bond that comes with some limitations on its use. They can only be used for that particular installation. Okay. There are two characteristics on these bonds. First of all, so far, with very few exceptions, they have been issued at a premium to the normal bond. So you pay a little bit more to have a green bond than to have a normal bond. And the second is that you have to follow a certain process after that to enable a certification agency to actually certify that, yes, that money that was issued for that bond actually went to that project and not elsewhere. So there are quite a lot of paperwork and activity that has nothing to do with the investment, just to certify that the bond is used in the proper way. So, of course, we issued green bonds and for a long time. Then we asked ourselves, at the end of the day, first of all, why should it be that a green bond costs more than a normal bond? It should be exactly the opposite, because green investments are less risky and more sustainable. So why should they be penalized by a cost that is higher than unsustainable activities? there's something wrong here. It's against logic. And then we said, and why should we also be, doomed to do all this paperwork just to demonstrate that we're using the money in that stuff? Let's do something else. And let's go and say, if take one of the sustainable development goals, the one that we work on a lot, for example, decarbonize the energy mix. So goal number 7. And say, guys, we have a certain percentage of renewable capacity in our mix, and we want to grow it. Do you think it is less risky or more risky, Enel, after it has done that? The profile of the risk of the company, is it improving if we add more renewable energy rather than thermal generation? Clearly, the profile of the risk is improving. We are less risky in that category. So if it's true that we are less risky, if we do this, do you also agree that we are entitled to pay the bond less, not more, than a normal bond? Because the profile of the risk of the company is lower. So give us that money at a lower spread. We commit to reach a certain percentage of renewable capacity by year 21. And if we do it, fine. If we don't do it, and that's easy to look at because these are numbers that are super easy to check. You don't need a lot of certification. If we don't do it, that means that our risk profile hasn't changed. Then it's fair that we pay a higher rate. So there is let's say, a higher rate switch if we don't reach the SDG objective that we said we want. So how long did it take for me to tell you this? Like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe more. This was looked upon as an incredible idea. This was like, this is amazing. This is a big innovation. So, and we had an incredible success. The first SDG bond was issued in the US. And it was, I think it was, I don't remember, it was we wanted $1 billion. We ended up having 1.5 because it was so oversubscribed.
Yes, that's following.
And then we did the same in Europe, and it was twice the amount. So we ended up having a lot more than we thought we would get. But more than that, we got an incredible amount of attention from people saying, this idea is amazing. How did you come to it? And he said, that's how we came to it. I mean, it's surprisingly strange how. Then if you look at the fact that there are 17 SDGs, and we just take the one that has to do with us. But if we were a pharmaceutical company, we would look at other SDGs and replicate the same scheme with another metric, and you could do it again and again and again, to the point that we are writing now. We wrote a letter to the EU, telling them you should look into it and start to consider a EU sustainability-linked bond at European level, because this can be happening also in that case. If Europe reaches certain SDGs goals as a whole, the market should pay less than the normal Euro bonds that you issue today. Is this killing the green bonds? No, it's a completely different market. You can be an oil company and you can issue a green bond, because the oil company can build a solar farm. And for that solar farm, it will get a green bond. Will that certify that the oil company is super sustainable?
Probably not.
Maybe not that much, but yeah.
That brings me to the last topic that I would like to address with you, and we already talked about it. Is part of the innovation that you also brought into the system. In this case, for financial tools, but the mix of innovation and sustainability that you brought over. You call it innovability. And you have the Ernesto Chorra.
That's Ernesto Chorra, trademark.
And I think it's particularly interesting because this is a clear example of how innovation can also be brought into financial tools, not necessarily through technology or integration with the world. So that's the last topic I would like to address. And I know you've been a very strong very, very committed to this since the very beginning, extremely well appreciated also from the world of innovators. I've seen you, engaging and being interested with talking to hundreds of startups. So I think it's definitely part of also of your personal commitment. But topic of that we address in multiple cases that is becoming more and more higher in the list of the top managements. How do you measure today the impact of the investment that you're doing in the world of innovation? I know it's kind of a gray area, but in general, when you decide this is the commitment of a budget for innovation, how do you eventually, as in top management today, have learned to measure the impact at maybe at the top line, but also at the bottom line? So better revenues, better efficiency.
First of all, there were different, and there still are, unfortunately, different ways to measure the effort that a company is putting on innovation. And the first and most misguided principle is tell me the R&D budget, and that's it. So everybody would put in the R&D budget whatever, so that the numbers become very high. And then you look at it and say, is this really R&D? What are we talking about? So we had the same. We had a certain R&D budget, and which was absolutely rubbish. I mean, it was completely disconnected with any innovative content. So I think measuring innovation with how much money you devote to innovation is not really the best approach, I would add. Perhaps one better approach is to say, what is the number of problems that you generated over a certain number of time, over a certain period of time? Say, I use the word problems, okay, not solutions. So how many problems did you identify to be solved in, say, a year? Because if you don't start measuring how many problems you generate, you will never find what innovation did to you. And then you say, how many of these problems did you solve in the following 2-3 years? And what these solutions brought to you? And that's a little bit more precise. Because, if you don't have any problems, why you should innovate? What's your problem, in fact?
What's your problem?
So everything starts from that. And the fact is that most companies' culture is that the manager that typically says to the employee, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. You heard this many times. Don't come with problems, come with solutions. So the guys that have problems cannot come up with problems because they cannot find a solution, and they keep the problems hidden,
right,
which is a terrible mistake, because that is the breeding ground for innovation, problems. So we started the other way around, saying, guys, we need problems, and people looking, okay, that's a trap, and we're not falling in that. So we had to work a lot to, let's say, liberalize the discovery of problems and make it legitimate under the law. And then after that, then we had to go out because people were still shy to, okay, it's not my problem, it's your problem, you solve it. That's, then we said, okay, fine. We go outside, and we went to you and to Israel and to many other places today. And we said, guys, we have these problems we cannot solve. Then say we had 5 answers, 4 were bullshit, 1 was right. And we started solving problems. So people started to see that actually the problems could be solved by other people. And they, all of a sudden, this was happening over the last, maybe 3 years ago, started really like boom. All of a sudden, solutions started to come from within the company. And we discovered to have innovation capabilities, which were not believing it was the right time to come up. But they finally understood it was now not only legitimate, but also encouraged, and they came out. So it was kind of Very strange
It's
trip.
definitely,
Yeah.
and I think that today the result is that you guys as Enel have been seen as a leader in this process, right? There is no one single solution, right, of how to get structure, but you definitely are
we
creating the path.
But
do you have the question I had? Do you have any specific lessons learned that you want to pass to other CEOs of other groups that today are starting that journey that you started years ago?
I think you have to liberate people from the anxiety of making mistakes, because nobody really loves to make a mistake. But in companies, this mistake aversion is really sometimes deep rooted into the company culture, and that is really a major problem because if you cannot make a mistake freely, not even a small one, it's difficult that you actually can innovate. So you have to free this mistake syndrome. I'm not saying that you have to encourage mistakes. It's not the right thing to do, but say that let people be honest about their mistakes without the fear of losing their job or even not having advancement in career. But I believe honestly that if you have the courage to say, okay, I made a mistake, and not try to hide it, which creates a lot of additional complications, because hidden mistakes are really toxic. So free the mistake, and then I think you should not be afraid of discovering that you have an endless production of problems, because that's where innovation comes from.
Listen, Francesco, I will leave it there. It's been such a pleasure, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you again, Marco.
In intimacy of your home, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you in person.
I hope.
Soon.
Yeah, we need to meet again.
Very good.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.